Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 91st episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And if you didn't know, May is Teen Self-Esteem Month. And it's a great opportunity to raise awareness of the importance of ensuring our teens are self-aware and feel confident about themselves. The effect that their self-esteem has on physical and mental well-being is of paramount importance and a crucial focus of awareness for the month. As we all know, unless you were very lucky and sailed through it, the teenage years are a notoriously difficult time for a majority of young people, especially during a pandemic and the ongoing impacts of a pandemic. And therefore, it's a fantastic way of checking in and ensuring that everyone is doing everything they can to support and nurture the teams in their lives, be it family or friends. On top of the physical, hormonal, and emotional changes going on, teens also have to contend with the added pressures of social changes, new relationships, social media, increased educational expectations, thinking about their future, political structures, not knowing how they fit into that necessarily, peer pressure, and impossible societal standards perpetuated by the media, and of course some parents, friends, etc. So to join me to talk about this more is the wonderful Jenny Garrett, OBE. Jenny is an award-winning career coach, and in fact, she's been my coach, and she's also a leadership trainer with over 13 years experience of running a global business. She's written an Amazon best-selling book entitled Rocking Your Role on the taboo subject of female breadwinners. Jenny has reached an audience of over 30,000 people through her speaking engagements and coach individuals all over the globe, from Australia to Botswana, the US, Spain, and the UK, with over 3,000 coaching hours under her belt. And Jenny gives back via her social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens, hence that's why she's here today. And her most recent clients include MasterCard, EY, and the NHS. Jenny is regularly asked for her expert opinion in the media, and she's featured in BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour, The Telegraph, Sky TV, and Glamour magazine. Interestingly, Jenny started off from humble beginnings, growing up in a council estate in northwest London to a teen mum. She's been able to surpass expectations of herself through tenacity, hard work, and optimism. Due to financial constraints, she studied 5 years part-time while also working full-time to achieve her business degree, and then went on to complete a master's degree part-time while running her business and having a young daughter. Her husband has been an invaluable support and an unsung hero in her success. He's enabled her to shine and allowed their story to be shared in her book. She hasn't been afraid to be vulnerable. Jenny says sharing her experience of being a female breadwinner in her book and in the media has enabled other women to do the same and get an important topic discussed among women and men in order to improve things for everyone. She's also been told that her work that she does is a yoga stretch for their career, because Jenny's work is characterized by having depth, personalization, and meaning, or some would say soul. I would definitely say soul. And one client described Jenny as a yoga stretch for the career. And I think that's a beautiful way to summarize what you do, Jenny. Huge welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Layla. I'm really happy to be here. Been an avid listener, so it's great to be a part of it.
Oh, it's an absolute joy to have you here. And I was telling listeners that, of course, you were my coach in 2015, which is how I think I got to where I am today.
A tiny bit of me and a whole lot of you.
So, Jenny, can you tell our listeners, as a kickoff question, what made you want to become a coach and what was your journey to becoming a coach?
It's really interesting that I used to be a marketer, really loved marketing, and I thought marketing was a thing I was born to do. And then one day a colleague who's now a really good friend came into my office and just said, what next? Where are you going with your career? And I remember thinking, I thought I was here. I thought I was doing a good job. And she said, you can do more. You can get a bigger budget or a bigger team elsewhere. At the time, that didn't appeal to me. I was lifestyle-wise, I wanted to be close to home with my work. And then she said, what about coaching? Actually, people come into your office, they come away with actions, they come away motivated, and you're a great listener. Why don't you go on a coaching program? And I was really lucky to be in the place I was, where they supported me to attend a coaching program. And I found it personally and professionally transformational. Something that I just attended from a bit of feedback from a friend, which I thought was something that I would put on my CV. became my life's work, because I just realized the power of coaching to really transform people, to help them realize their potential and be much happier in their lives. And that's why I do it every day, because I just see people blossom. I see them reach their potential, step out of their comfort zone, and really make the most of who they are for the benefit of themselves, but also the people around them.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenny. And do you find that there's a thread, if you look back, do you think there's a thread in your family and your culture? Maybe it wasn't called coaching, but in terms of you being a good listener in your approach and how easy coaching came to you?
That's such a good question. Is there a thread in my family? I don't know. I think maybe my grandmother, actually. I feel such an affinity with her, even though we were quite different people. She passed away a few years ago now. But I would say she was a really good listener, and not a person who would jump in to give advice, but a person who would sit back, listen, and ask you some questions. So yeah, I think she's a naturally like that. There's lots of people in my family though who really want to jump in and give advice and are not good listeners, if I'm honest. But my grandmother particularly, I see that thread with her. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about that before, Layla. But yeah, I think there's definitely some similarity there between her and myself, I think.
Yeah, and so what you mentioned, it's about, you've seen the transformational change in people when they have coaching. Is that really what drives you? Is that really what you love about what you do?
There's so much I love about what I do, but one of the things I love is that I think I am one of life's people who wants to learn all of the time. And actually, when I'm coaching my clients, I learn a lot from them. So I'm not going into the coaching conversation to think, oh, I'm going to learn because they're going to tell me something about their life in a different country before, or whatever they teach me about their profession. But I think I absorb a lot of information from all of these wonderful conversations with different people. And there's so much variety. So I think it's that continual learning. I think it's the variety. I think it's a privilege for someone to be open with me that I don't take lightly. Someone to be open with you and share their fears, their opportunities, their difficulties. It's a privilege to have that conversation. So there's so much I love about it. But ultimately, I'll give an example. Yesterday, I spoke to a client and she's taken 2 big leaps during our coaching. And now she's got an amazing job that she wouldn't have dreamed of having, for another 10 years. And I was just elated. So I just get so much joy from seeing people, just really grab life by the balls, basically.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? The reciprocity of it in terms of what we learn and how we grow as coaches. The more people we coach, the more listening that we do, the more powerful the questions that we're able to ask.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely, completely. And I think that's the thing about coaching, is that it's not a job that ever gets stale. And drawing on your point there, because there's always more. You're always thinking, how could I ask this differently? How could I help them think this through? And you're always wanting to step up and be better in service of your clients. So at some roles, people may get to a point where they just think, well, I know this inside out, day in, day out. There's nothing for me to think of anymore. I can switch my brain off. But I don't think coaching's like that, because you just always are hungry to be better, do it better in service of your clients.
And a lot of the work that you do is with women, not exclusively, but you work a lot with women. And we're talking about self-esteem today. So I wanted to ask you, what does the term self-esteem mean to you?
Yes, I think it's about appreciating yourself, and being kind to yourself, and recognizing what you have to offer. And I think it's not needing that appreciation from outside. It's about being able to create it yourself. I remember when I first started my coaching training, I think we read one of Carl Rogers' books, I think, and they talked about the locus of evaluation, that sense of not needing everyone else to validate you, but for you to validate yourself. And that's what I think it means. And I think it was only last year I realized how much self-talk I have, and how much I boost my own self self-worth and self-esteem by what I say to myself. I started hearing myself, and maybe because we've been at home during lockdown, saying, well done, Jenny. Oh, you did a good job. Oh, and I heard myself giving myself those boosts, that validation all the time. It became much more clear to me that I do that quite a lot. And I found that really interesting. And for me, that self-worth, that self-esteem, is really about having that really positive self-talk with yourself all the time. And that's not to say that you never say, oh, you made a mistake or you have a bad day, but it's really using that self-talk to talk to yourself as you would a really good friend, and be kind and supportive to yourself. And so not needing all of that external validation as much. And when you do get it, it's great, but you don't blow it out of proportion. So if someone says they love you or they like you, don't think, oh, I'm suddenly worthy. And if someone says they don't like you, you don't think, oh, my life's over, because you've got that for yourself and you can give it to yourself. So yeah, that's how I think about self-worth.
Definitely. And the fact that we might have to get over some hurdles and barriers, and speaking to ourselves kindly can really help push us in the right direction, I think.
Yes, yeah. And one of the things, being really conscious of that self-talk, just beginning to be a bit more conscious of it, because people can be really quite cruel to themselves in the way they wouldn't be to other people. And think about that voice is there all the time talking to you, and how that could be impacting you in lots of different ways, mentally, physically, emotionally. So becoming much more aware of that voice, and actually making it, as you said, a kind and gentle one.
And you've got Rocking Your Role, which of course your book is about female breadwinners, and you've got your community interest company, Rocking Your Teens. So how do you support teens with their self-esteem?
Yeah, this is a really big one for me. So when my daughter was in her early teens, she struggled a bit with her self-esteem. She was all of the social media influences, and also going to a new school and fitting in and things like that impacted her. And I was quite shocked, to be honest with you, because I thought I'd really, brought her up to have lots of self-esteem, and she was going to be fine and ultra confident. But of course, not thinking about all of the external things that were impacting her. And when I read about it, I saw that actually it wasn't just my daughter. It was really, really common that this was the experience of young teenagers. And I wanted to create an event for teen girls to support them, because I thought, well, I knew that absolutely teenagers don't want to listen to their parents, basically. So me sharing my thoughts and knowledge with her wasn't going to make any difference. I spoke about it to someone who's now my business partner, and he said, oh yes, this is a great idea. You can run it in an organization I work at, but let's also do something for boys, he said. And we ended up creating Rocking Your Teens alongside someone else who's an excellent event manager. But what we do is we get young people in front of young people to really help them think about what they might be doing to themselves that might be damaging themselves, and help them think much more positively about themselves, build their self-worth, build their resilience. And I think it's really important that young people speak to young people. So we try not to have anyone speak who's over 30, for example. It might sound like age discrimination, but we want to get through to the audience. And it was really interesting. One of the exercises that some women came, called the Self-Esteem team. They were really great.
Yes, I know them actually. I know, because one of them is a really good. So Olivia Mendoza, who's on my podcast episode, is her sister. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, so they came and they said to them, talk to your friend, talk to the person next to you, and give them a compliment. And they did, and they said, when you give this person a compliment, did you ever think, oh, they're not really a nice person, or they're not dressed in the right way, or how they look really matters? Or do you compliment them on something much more than that? And they said, yeah, the things they compliment people on are not around their looks. The things they value in other people are much more about if they're kind, if they're reliable, if they're nice people, if they're funny. And I thought that was such a good exercise to help young people realize that the external stuff really doesn't matter, and that's not what people value about you the most. And so that's what we try and do. We bring young people in to speak to young people. We do experiential exercises to help them get in touch with what's amazing about themselves. And what's great is it's a school trip. So then the teachers take it back and they run it in assemblies and they do all sorts of things. So one school created a tree in their hall, and they, on each leaf, all of the young people in the school wrote something that they love about themselves, and they've got this tree growing through the middle of their school, which is really beautiful. So the teachers take it beyond the events that we have, and we've been running 5 years now. We've had over 2,000 people, young people, through our doors, and we get some wonderful feedback. We had some feedback from a parent who said, my daughter normally comes back from a school trip, and she said, you ask her how it was, and she says, grunts at me. And she came back from our trip and she said, she's going to mentor other girls. She's a role model and she's going to make a difference. She's got so much to offer. And that sort of thing, when we get those stories, it's just so heartwarming, and it just, you get that, and that it's all worthwhile, all the exhaustion, all the the late nights, and because we do it for love. That's the only reason we do it. So absolutely adore it.
It is brilliant, and I wish something like that had been around when I was growing up. And do you notice, Jenny, that there is maybe a difference, or teens of colour are experiencing different things to their white counterparts around self-esteem?
Yeah, I think yes. I don't know if we notice it. Well, actually, no, that's a really good point, because we were talking about it this morning, because we had a meeting and we were talking about the fact that it was actually at the boys' conference where we had Johnny Benjamin, who's a mental health trainer. Yeah, great, him. So we had him come and speak about his experience, which it's been really, really tough, and he's living with difficult mental health situation. And a little boy, a black boy, spoke up and he said, something that affects my mental health is that I go to the corner shop and they're always accusing me of stealing each time, and I feel really uncomfortable going there now, and it really brings me down. And that's a prime example of, well, either outright racism or microaggressions or bias, whatever you want to call it, impacting a young black boy in his early teens, and also not being addressed, because sadly his mum, who he spoke to, was sort of dismissing it. Oh, you're probably imagining things, don't worry about it, when actually it was a very real situation for him that was really bringing him down. So I absolutely think that sometimes what comes out are some challenges that children of colour are experiencing, which, because I think have been going on for so long, sometimes even their parents are not acknowledging effectively for them to be able to deal with it.
It's so true. And I remember growing up and just feeling so isolated because no one looked like me. It wasn't the standard of beauty. It was the 90s. I mean, it's not great now, but there really was no one. And I know many of my black colleagues and friends have experienced the same thing. And it shouldn't be about that. But of course, when you're a teen, you feel it acutely. Your hormones are in a very different place to when you're in your late 30s, as I am now. So I kind of look back and think, why did that really upset me? But you're so much more fragile, I think, when you're teens.
I completely agree. And also, I remember, why did none of the boys want to ask me out? They're asking everybody else. Something must be wrong with me. And I think it's really difficult, absolutely, really, really challenging. However much you try, as you said, not to let these things impact you. That there are these comments or these comments that really make you not feel good about yourself. And I think the work we do really does help with that. And something we did last year was we got women to write a letter to teens. So a woman to write a letter to them. So they all got a letter. And our conference got cancelled in 2020, but we were able to send them all out this year to those who attended our most recent event. And we read every letter because we wanted to make sure they were safe to give to the young people. And there was so much beautiful inspiration in there, and so many people sharing their journey and their how they found it difficult as teens, but how they managed to get through it. And I think that's one of the wonderful things, that we can share our knowledge and we can reach out to young people and just remember and empathize with them, and help them know that actually they will get through this difficult time.
Yeah, it's such a gift to receive a letter, especially nowadays when they're so rare. And so, Jenny, do you think certain cultures, diaspora cultures, or from the global perspective that you had, enable teens and women to have higher self-esteem than others?
So do certain cultures enable teens to have higher
self-esteem, do you think?
Than others? I think that's a really good question. Do you know what? Well, one thing I want to say about that, which is that what I'm loving about young people at the moment is they're calling each other queen. And I'm really loving that, because it's sort of, remember, you come from royalty, you are regal, and you can stand up strong and be really proud of yourself. So that there's something that I'm feeling is a bit of a movement now, and also Black Girl Magic hashtag and things like that are sort of pulling back on all of the things that made you not feel so good about yourself. But in terms of certain cultures, for me, if you're a blonde white woman, you automatically feel great about yourself. And of course, some there'll be some people who say, no, I don't feel good about myself, and I am a blonde white woman. But generally, there's nothing in the media, there's nothing around that doesn't tell you you should get everything you want, and that you're amazingly beautiful. And an example is right now that this might date your podcast in the end, but there's a show on called The Circle. And it's all about people pretending to be well, sometimes they're catfishes, but they're talking to each other through screens, and they don't get to meet each other to the end. And there are two people, a South Asian heritage woman who's playing the game and being herself, a blonde woman who's pretending to be a man and being her boyfriend. And people love this blonde woman. And I know that if she wasn't blonde, if she was from the diaspora, actually, she would be vilified. She's lying. She's making someone fall in love with her. She's doing all the things that are not good. But because of her packaging, it's okay. And the South Asian woman who's playing the game, she's being the villain. But she's being herself, but she's being called the villain and a terrible person, and get her out. And these standards are there all the time. That these false standards and these unequal standards are there. And I think that's what's really tough, which it makes it really hard to stand and be proud in your own skin when you know that you will always be vilified. You will always be the person who takes one step to the left or to the right, slightly out of what's expected of you, and that's not going to be okay. So I think there are huge challenges in terms of really being proud of yourself and standing in your most powerful self when you're from the diaspora, and issues around colorism and all sorts of things, and being biracial or mixed heritage, that are really difficult within all of that, because people who are lighter skinned or mixed heritage are sometimes deemed more beautiful. So there's a lot to work on there. And of course, people telling you you're beautiful or making you feel beautiful or giving you leeway because of how you look makes you feel better about yourself. And so then it's easier to stand more powerfully. But as I said, I think there's such a movement now, the Black Girl Magic and calling each other queens, and I'm seeing people just stand really proudly and wearing natural hair and all of that stuff saying, I'm here, I'm me, I'm proud. So I think things are getting better.
Yeah, that point about the packaging of someone, it doesn't matter what they do, they can get away with it. But also this thing about beauty, and like you said, when the teens give each other a compliment, it's, I think you're kind, I think you're interesting, I think you have a really amazing perspective on things. And we still in society, whether you're teenagers or adults or even in the elder community, there's still a focus on looks, isn't there, and beauty in certain cases.
Yes, yeah. And yeah, absolutely there is. I do think that I've noticed, I think that African people are very proud of themselves. They're very good at being holding on to what's important and being proud and recognizing that their descendants are regal. So I think there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, I think of Ashanti cultures because I've got friends from that background, and the confidence and the way they hold themselves and how they challenge negativity is absolutely to be admired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can workplaces have conversations, do you think, and support their workforce with self-esteem? We've talked about women and teens, but self-esteem, I think lack of self-esteem does result also for me in toxic masculinity. And many workplaces aren't really having these conversations. So what would be your tips around how workplaces could start to have these conversations with people, and what would that look like, or what could that look like?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that I was doing some work around International Women's Day with a number of organizations, and just brought up some stats. So for example, when women have appraisals, they're often given feedback on the way they come across, your voice or your assertiveness or all of these sorts of things, the way you hold yourself, your gravitas, your presence, and men are very rarely given that sort of feedback. So even just having that as a bit of a starting point for a conversation, I think is quite important. Would you give the feedback that you're giving to your female colleagues to your male colleagues? Why not? If you wouldn't, why not? And often they wouldn't, because you're not judging your male colleagues in the same way that you are your female colleagues, and it's a bit unfair, to be honest, what's happening. So I think sometimes a stat can really help you recognize that actually there are some unfair standards that women are experiencing in the workplace that something needs to be done about. But also, I think that not being a bystander is the big thing. So I had a client a little while back, and I remember her telling me she was in a meeting. Maybe she zoned out for a minute, and she asked a question, and the male chair of the meeting sort of said, "I asked that question already, are you stupid?" And sort of put a hand up in her face, completely out of order and very, very rude. I mean, people do miss things or don't hear things. And she said she was really embarrassed and quite annoyed at being spoken to in that way. After the meeting, she walked out, and a colleague said to her, "Oh, that was really out of order. Are you all right?" And I said, that colleague should have stood up for you. Other people should have stood up for you in the meeting and said to that person, that's not okay. Because the truth of the matter is, we can, of course, fight our own battles, but it's tough. It's really tough, especially if you're in the minority, to be continually fighting these battles day in and day out with sexism, racism, whatever it is. And there's so many people who are there who see and hear it, and they should be speaking up on your behalf. So that, actually getting allies who won't be a bystander, who will actually speak up, I think is really, really important for you, because you can't do it on your own. Other people have to amplify your voice. Other people have to support you. And actually, what happens when you are a woman or from a minority group, people just think you've got a chip on your shoulder. They don't always hear you. And it takes someone else to say, well, actually, I'm not a woman, or I'm a white person, and I see it. And so you need to do something about it. So I definitely think getting yourself some allies, but helping people not to be bystanders, to actually not talk to you after the meeting, to speak up in the meeting and to say what they see is wrong. And I do think that some organizations are really, really toxic, and they need some sort of whistleblowing procedure. They need some anonymous helplines where people can say, actually, I'm being bullied, I'm being sexually harassed, I'm being discriminated against. because people won't say it if they feel there are going to be some dire consequences towards them. And if you're already being bullied, that's, it's really hard for you to speak up. So I definitely think that a lot of organizations that I've spoken to sort of think, oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing, that we shouldn't have to be anonymous. But it might be where you're at that you do have to create these anonymous opportunities for people to speak up so that you can do something about it. So those are a few of my thoughts on that.
And that makes me think it's about self-esteem as well, though, isn't it? About challenging. So how self-esteem links into being an upstander, being an active bystander, being able to challenge assertively. So there's that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the problem is that people can really batter your self-esteem. They can really make you feel like you're useless in the workplace, can't they? If someone's always criticizing my work, telling me I'm doing it wrong, telling me I'm no good at my job, eventually I start to believe it. And in the moment, I might not even realize that I'm being bullied or being discriminated against. I would definitely say build your network of supporters around you. Journal and reflect on your thoughts would be really helpful things to do. Yeah, start to notice how other people might challenge. So is this just you? Is it others? How do others challenge, and how do other people handle the situation? Are some of the things that I would think of doing. And I'd also say sometimes you have to leave. Sometimes you have to leave toxic environments. They're not going to get any better. They're very unhealthy. And you just have to leave. And a very quick story. When I was in my early 20s, I worked for an organization that really was quite toxic. And I would describe myself as a good girl. I just am quite, I think I'm quite an obedient person. I'd be on time, I'd leave on time, I'd be conscientious. That's just the kind of person I am. But one day I had just such a terrible experience at that place. I walked out at lunchtime and never went back. And it was the best thing I ever did for my self-esteem, because they were just I would be destroyed if I had stayed there. Each day I was being micromanaged. I was, it was very cliquey. It was unhealthy. And that's the only time I've ever walked out on a job. But I'm very proud of myself now to think at that time, I knew that if I stayed any longer, this was just going to damage me, so much that I probably need years and years of therapy to get back on my feet again.
And you also knew that something else will work out. So you had the esteem to say, you know what, I'm drawing the line, I'm better than this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that is the challenge, isn't it? That people will have financial responsibilities and really worry. But the longer you stay, the harder it is to leave if it's unhealthy for you. And the harder it is to find another job because you're not confident enough to do so.
It's so true. And so, Jenny, you're an incredibly busy person with your businesses and all the work that you do. How do you look after your own mental health to maintain your self-esteem? And what are your top 3 tips?
Yeah, I absolutely am busy, and it's really interesting. And I would say my top 3 tips are, the first is that I like variety. I probably don't do a consistent practice for a long period of time. So I might do something for a month and then I'll switch it up and do something different. But currently, trampolining is my thing.
Yes.
I invested in a mini trampoline. I watch videos online and do 20 minutes jumping every day, and it's really uplifting. It's supposed to be really good for your system as well, boost your immune system and all sorts of things for you. So it's really good for you, but it boosts my mood. So trampolining is my top thing at the moment. But as I said, if you ask me next month, it might be something else. And I love journaling. So I love to use prompts just to journal how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, and reflect. And definitely journaling on my feelings is a big one for me. I think we can easily lose touch with our feelings, how we're feeling and what's going on for us. And journaling for me is a real reconnection with who I am and what I'm about. And I'd say the last one is just about breathing. Exhaling, not inhaling, exhaling. So a good exhalation for me relieves a lot of stress. Just pushing all of that air out forces you then to breathe in deeply. And it's something that takes a minute, but makes such a huge difference. So I'd say those are my 3 top tips.
Brilliant. And I love the point about changing it up. I'm exactly the same. I can't stick to one practice. Well, sometimes I can, but most of the time, not really. So Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your nuggets, your journey. If people want to know more about your work, how should they contact you? How should they get in touch? And I also wondered if you wanted to mention the BAME Coaches Directory.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I haven't mentioned that. So yeah, my website is jennygarrett.global, and Garrett is RRT. So pretty easy, jennygarrett.global. You'll find everything about me there. And yes, last year I created a diverse coaches directory. What I found was actually I'd be in rooms in corporate organizations and I'd be the only coach from a diverse background. And also I was getting these comments to say that there were no other coaches from a diverse background. And I wanted to shine a light on the amazing coaches that are out there, qualified, experienced, and doing great work, and also help change organizations, because even if the senior team in an organization is a monoculture, actually by having a coach from a different background coach some of those senior leaders, you are bringing some diversity into the senior levels of the organization. So I thought it was another way to change things on the back of what was an awful time last year with the killing of George Floyd and the ongoing issues that we have around race in this country and around the world.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'll also include all those social media links and everything, so people can have a look in the show notes. And you're absolutely right about the ongoing conversations and trauma and pain that many of us as people of colour, global majority, diaspora groups are going through. So it's a conversation that absolutely we can't stop having. As you know, listeners, from my podcast, it's not something I just pick up. It's something that's been a thread through from day one. So Jenny, thank you so much again. And please do have a look at Jenny's work. She's absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I really wouldn't be where I am today without the magical coaching that I had and the action. It took me a while to take, but I did take it. And that's, I think it was absolutely a foundation into how Diverse Minds was formed and born. So thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you.
And brilliant listeners, we will see you in the next episode. So don't forget to join us next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.